Hello and welcome to the home of the Ghost Owl, and here we are in our Tomb Kings faction focus, looking at the rare unit part of the army roster. The series of videos designed to look at the 8th edition Warhammer Fantasy Battle rules to see how units and characters played, what their flavour and roles were, and how that might influence Warhammer The Old World. As you'd expect, their flavour and role to be quite similar, even if the rules are quite different. So without further ado, let's jump into this part of the army roster, often quite an interesting one when you get to the rare section. First up is the Necrolith Colossus, which was originally known as the Bone Giant, and you can see his picture there on the right hand side. Good strength, toughness, wounds and leadership with low weapon skill, political initiative, and he came with a hand weapon with the option of an additional hand weapon for attacks, extra attacks, great weapon for extra strength, or a Bow of the Desert. Bow of the Desert essentially being a bolt thrower, 48-inch, strength 6, multiple wound, D3 with no armor save, and that was extra points, but you know, this is on a ballistic skill of 2. So he comes with the usual animated construct, the large target and terror, arrows of Asaph, so he can move and shoot without any penalties, but his main rule specific to him is unstoppable assault. So when charging, unsafe wounds generate additional attacks. Overall, he was quite a goofy old model. I don't particularly like the look of this model. It was never taken due to better choices. The rare units, you know, there's a limited amount of points, and they're often quite a highly competitive category, and he just didn't match up compared to the others. He's quite expensive if you're going to take him as kind of a mobile war machine with the bow, which only has a ballistic skill of 2. There are better, tougher monsters for close combat, and it kind of made him a bit of a jack of all trades. If you take the bow, you don't get the benefit of unstoppable assault. You can give him the hand weapon or great weapon for his points cost. You'd probably be better off taking a Shabti or Necropolis Knights and saving your points in the rare category for something else. So that was the main problem with the Necrolith Colossus. Next up is kind of his brother in that respect, and there was never a model done for this character or this monster. However, because it's such a cool looking monster in the artwork, I thought I'd put in a picture of what he should look like based upon the design done for Total Warhammer. Good strength, toughness, wound, leadership, low weapon skill, political initiative. Now, equipment-wise, he comes with the Icon of Petra, which is a bound spell, power level 3. It's basically Shem's Burning Gaze from the Law of Light. And he also has the Scales of Azirion, which is a bound spell, power level 4, and that's Spirit Leech from the Law of Death. Now, special rules, animated construct, large target, terror, but his main one is Spirit Conduit. Friendly wizards within 12 inches get plus D3 to a casting roll. This was a really unique and interesting monster, and I gutted they never released a model for it, not only because it could have looked really cool, especially given what they did with the Necrosphinx, but to have a magical monster that buffs other magic users in an army that really needs magic would be really, really cool. Overall, it was never seen in the tabletop, almost certainly not in my era. I'm sure there were somewhere, mainly because the potential conversion that people did, which came from the Necrosphinx, wasn't just a simple, easy head swap or weapon swap. It was actually quite more involved in that, which was a shame, as I say, because it was quite unique. And it could have been interesting with that benefit to the Leash Priests. Again, the only issue being quite expensive in a quite competitive section of the army list. Next up, now this is the alternate build of the Kemrian War Sphinx. This is the Necrosphinx, and like the War Sphinx, an absolutely stunning looking model. Good strength, toughness, wounds, attacks, leadership, low weapon skill, ballistic skill, and initiative. Equipment, none, but it could take the Envenomed Sting for extra points. That's essentially giving it poisoned attacks. very useful and pretty much always taken. Animated construct, large target and terror. Does get killing blow on all his attacks, which is great. And it's got a decent number of attacks. You've got a good chance of, rolling a couple of sixes and roll to wound. It can fly. So again, in an army with low mobility, this has got a 10-inch move. He can't march still, but he's got a 10-inch move. And bearing in mind, most of the rest of the army is moving around at 4 or 5. Being able to move 10 as a very high toughness monster, toughness 8, the same as the Kemrian War Sphinx, and put out some quite significant damage, that was quite useful. He also had the special ability, which is Decapitating Strike, which was nominate one attack of all of them. You don't exchange them, you just pick one, and that attack becomes strength 10 with heroic killing blow. And that basically meant you got the same as killing blow, a 6 to wound automatically kills, but this now applies to any model. So you could heroic killing blow dragons. You could one-shot kill a full health dragon. And not unsurprising given the size of those blades on his arms. So, great looking model. There was always one in my army list. The fly and the output made it good. Great at killing tough units and enemy monsters. Say the Envenom Sting, worth it. Just a few extra points to get poison attacks. It is the most expensive model in the army roster, but I still felt it was worth taking. Even though it's heroic killing blow ability, it's hard to pull off. The chance of getting your strength 10 attack in, then rolling a 6 to wound, but the threat of that on other people's monsters, their dragons, their hell pit abominations and so on, would often make people avoid it like the plague, because you could guarantee if you brought your nice new painted dragon, you'd fight this thing and it would kill it in one shot. New model syndrome in the extreme. So a great looking model, and this was the model that people used the top half, that torso there. They removed the blades and then they put it on a legged body to make your Hydra Titan. Next up, Screaming Skull Catapult. Now, for those people that remember the Undead faction before it was split into Tomb Kings and Vampire Counts, so you're going way back in the day now, the Screaming Skull Catapult was part of the roster then, and then when the book split into Vampire Counts and Tomb Kings, the Screaming Skull Catapult moved across into the Tomb Kings. Stats-wise, it's a war machine with an absolutely terrible stat crew who could have a hand weapon and light armor, or that's what they came with, but you could take skulls off the foe for extra points. This is -1 leadership for panic test. Now that does become important. So what is it? It's a stone thrower. The way stone throwers work in Warhammer Fantasy Battle is it had a 60-inch range. I think the minimum was 12, and essentially used a 3-inch template. And it's similar to that Thunder Crush type we talked about earlier. Every model underneath the template is strength 3. The model that's underneath the hole in the middle is a strength 9, but this time multiple wound D6. So if you were lucky enough to roll a hit, you could actually do D6 damage to a monster. So its main special rule is Screaming Skulls. So if you cause 1 or more casualty, that unit must take a panic test. Now, if you've taken Skulls of the Foe, they now take a panic test at -1 leadership. Skulls of the Foe, quite important. Overall, it was a great unit. I always had at least 1, sometimes 2 in each army. Even better against low leadership armies. So if you've got something like Orcs with Goblins, Skaven, anything with low leadership, this thing could be a real nightmare. You'd start causing units to flee. Add that with the Skulls of the Foe, really taking the leadership down. And it's good flexibility because you could chuck it at big, large infantry blocks, which were quite common in the meta, and get the most out of that template. But you could also, chance your hand to throw it at a monster, and hopefully you roll to hit, and suddenly you're doing a strength 9 D6 multiple wound hit on the monster. And if that monster's close enough to a unit and you scatter, you never know, you might scatter into that unit. So pretty good, pretty flexible, and definitely worth taking. And I really hope we see again a reincarnation. I think they could do an amazing version of the Screaming Skull catapult. A nice plastic kit. You know, we've seen what they've done with the Ossiarch Bone Reapers. I don't want something as crazy as that with all the legs everywhere, but I think something could be really cool in a similar vein as you see in that picture, though significantly updated. Finally, for the rare units, is a cracker. It's a good one, and it is the Casket of Souls. Now, the model, again, for me, looks great, looks fantastic. Unfortunately, it did end up at the end of the edition in Finecast, and it came from metal, and there were issues with quality on it. However, it looks great, and again, it's got to be a key candidate for being redone in plastic, because I think, again, the Casket of Souls, you could do something so cool in terms of coming up with a model based upon what we see with the current miniatures that come from Games Workshop today. Now, this is a war machine. However, this time the crew have not bad stats. Equipment-wise, the guards come with great weapons and light armor. The keeper himself comes with a hand weapon and light armor, and your unit includes 1 keeper and 2 guards. Now, the guards have Killing Blow, the same as Tomb Guard. It has the ability, which is the Covenant of Power. Now, that gives you plus D3 power dice, and to an army that relies on magic, that's quite important. It comes with the Light of Death. Now, this is a bound spell, power level 5, direct damage at 48 inches. And what that does is, essentially, it causes a leadership test on the unit. But they take that leadership test on 3d6. And if they fail, they suffer the number of wounds as per the difference between the leadership and the result of the roll, and there's no armor saves allowed. Now, the great thing about this was, if there is another unengaged enemy unit within 6 inches of the original target, you roll a dice. On a 3+, the spell jumps, and that unit has to do exactly the same again. Leadership test on 3d6. And this will keep happening until the jump roll is failed. So that's pretty nice. The downside of this quite cool thing is Unleashed Souls. If destroyed, roll a d6 for every unit, including friendly units, within 12 inches. Right, that's a 24-inch bubble on the table. And on a 4+, that unit will take d6 strength 6 hits, which are magical attacks and no armor save. So, I think, personally, in terms of if we look at the rules for the old world, either the d6 strength 6 hits is too much, or they need to reduce the range of this equivalent deadly demise that happens on a 4+. Overall, I mean, it's a good unit, has huge potential against armies which have low leadership and lots of multiple units. They just happen to be quite often the same. So Skaven, again, lots of units, low leadership. Orcs and Goblins, just to name a couple, generally lots of units and low leadership. Very, very vulnerable. However, the unit itself is vulnerable because you normally want to keep it 12 inches away from the rest of your army. So a fast cavalry unit, flying units are potentially going to go after this thing. Now, fortunately, it can defend itself against some of those really light skirmishing units. So if you've got somebody attacking you with bats or wolves or something like that, you've got a good chance of standing up to it. But if somebody comes after you with a flying monster, then you're probably going to be doomed at that point. Though that monster itself, or whatever does kill you, is going to suffer those d6 strength 6 hits. So that was always something that if you are going after this thing, you're going to have to deal with the fallout. Overall, good value for points. It does compete with the Screaming Skull Catapult. So, there's a lot of competition. We said limited available points in the rare category. If you're taking a Necro Sphinx, you're going to have to decide, are you taking a couple of Screaming Skull Catapults or one catapult and one casket? Often you might go for one of each just to spread out the capability, but those Screaming Skull Catapults are pretty nice as well. And there you go, that is the Tomb King's rare units. I think we've got some pretty cool units in there. I think we've got some great opportunities for new models or refreshed models for Warhammer The Old World. I think there's some quite unique units in here in terms of rules, and I hope they keep that uniqueness and flavour in the new edition, even with the new rules. Or new edition, Warhammer The Old World, it is a different game. It is not a new edition of Warhammer Fantasy Battle. Let's just be clear. It's not just going to be the 9th edition. This is going to be a quite different game across the board. They're looking at all the previous editions. It's going to be a rewrite from the ground up. Lots of factions aren't in it. So let's just be clear. It is not the new Warhammer Fantasy Battle in that regard. It's going to be quite different, I think, than maybe some expect. But Tomb Kings are on the inside, so we know they're getting new models. We've already seen one of those, but we know they're getting new models. We know they're going to get continually updated rules. So, I'm certainly hopeful of this faction, and one of these, a faction that was completely removed and not even taken across into Age of Sigmar. I hope you've enjoyed the video. I hope it's given you that knowledge about those Tomb King rare units, and if it did and you liked it, give it a thumbs up. If you didn't know, give it a thumbs down. Let me know why in the comments down below. And if you want to see more content, please hit that subscribe button. It's totally free for you to do, and it means such a big deal for me, so thank you for that in advance. You've been watching The Ghost Owl, and I'll see you very soon.